Urban legends are like modern-day folktales. They are stories that spread around by word of mouth or the internet, often presented as true, even though they usually aren't. These stories can be scary, funny, or just plain weird, and they often reflect the anxieties and interests of a particular time and place, and the Jehovah's Witnesses have quite a few. But one of them was rooted in fact. We are taking a creepy turn and diving into the world of Jehovah's Witness urban legends. These aren't your grandma's ghost stories. These are tales that have circulated among witnesses for years, talked about at kingdom halls, at gatherings, and even punted from the platform at meetings and at conventions. And most of these have a variation of the story depending on which side of the globe you're on. Let's get into it. Arguably the most well-known urban legend is the tale of the Smurf. The story goes as follows. A little boy brought his Smurf doll to the Kingdom Hall, and as the meeting proceeded and halfway through the Watchtower study, the Smurf doll subsequently got up and started to walk out of the Kingdom Hall. And some stories say that as the doll was walking out, it shouted profanities and mysteriously disappeared. I wonder if there is still a feral Smurf wandering around in the concrete jungle somewhere. Poor little guy. But there were other lesser-known Smurf tales as well, like the story of the Smurf curtains in a little boy's room that burst into flames. Now, I'm not sure where the origins of this urban legend stems from, but those poor little Smurfs have gotten a bad rap in that organization. This next urban legend is partly based on actual events. Pokemon, just like the Smurfs, are a children's series demonized during the late 90s by the Jehovah's Witnesses. Part of the marketing campaign for the series was trading cards and coins, and it was a craze at the time. However, I was witness, excuse the pun, to a Jehovah's Witness woman telling her grandchildren and her grandchildren's friends to destroy their trading cards and coins because they were demonic. The reason given was that children who were watching the show were getting demon-possessed and having seizures. However, this was rooted in reality, but not because of demon possession. On Tuesday night, December 16, 1997, Pokemon episode number 38, Denao Senshi Porygon, aired in Japan at 6:30. The program, broadcast over 37 TV stations, was already very popular in Japan and held the highest ratings for its time slot. In the episode, Pikachu and its human friends Satoshi, Kasumi, and Takeshi have an adventure that leads inside a computer. About 20 minutes into the program, the gang encounters a fighter named Polygon. A battle ensues during which Pikachu uses his electricity powers to stop a virus. The animators depict Pikachu's electric attack with a quick series of flashing lights. In all, millions watched the program. In one section of Japan, an estimated 70% of the 24,000 elementary school students and 35% of the 13,000 junior high school students watched the program, for a total of more than 21,000 in Aichi alone. In Tokyo, the local board of education investigated all public kindergartens, primary and middle schools in the area and found that more than 50,000 students, or 55% of the whole, watched the episode. And at about 6:51, the flashing lights filled the screens. By 7:30, according to Fire Defense Agency, 618 children had been taken to hospital, complaining of various symptoms. News of the attacks shot through Japan, and it was the subject of media reports later that evening. During the coverage, several stations replayed the flashing sequence, whereupon even more children fell ill and sought medical attention. The number affected by the second wave is unknown. Doctors said that children went into a trance-like state, similar to hypnosis, complaining of shortness of breath, nausea, and bad vision. The Guardian reported the event as follows. 25 years ago, at precisely 6:51 p.m. on 16th of December 1997, hundreds of children across Japan experienced seizures. In total, 685, which was 310 boys and 375 girls, were taken by ambulance to hospital. Within 2 days, 12,000 children had reported symptoms of illness. The common factor in this sudden mass outbreak was an unlikely culprit, an episode of the Pokemon cartoon series. The installment in question, Denao Senshi Porygon, was the 38th in the Pokemon anime's first season, and initially, at least, it sparked a medical mystery. 20 minutes into the cartoon, an explosion took place, illustrated by an animation technique known as Paka Paka, which broadcast alternating red and blue flashing lights at a rate of 12 Hz per 6 seconds. Instantly, hundreds of children experienced photosensitive epileptic seizures, accounting for some, but far from all, of the hospitalizations. The article goes on to state, the phenomenon, headlined Pokemon Shock by Japanese media, became big news. It was reported around the world. The cartoon's producers were questioned by police, while the Ministry of Health, Labor and Welfare held an emergency meeting. The share price of Nintendo, the company behind the Pokemon games, dropped by 3.2%. To medical experts, the figure of 12,000 children requiring medical treatment made no sense. The program had been watched by 4.6 million households, but 1 in 5,000 people has photosensitive epilepsy, 0.02%. The number of children reporting symptoms seemed out of all proportion. The mystery persisted for 4 years, until it piqued the attention of Benjamin Radford, a research fellow at the Committee of Skeptical Inquiry in the U.S., and co-host of the podcast Squaring Strange. The investigation had just stalled. The mystery sort of faded away without an explanation. He says, I wanted to see if I could solve the case. What Radford and Bartholomew discovered was that the vast majority of affected children had become ill after hearing about the program's effects. Although the cartoon's transmission on 16 December did indeed cause hundreds of children to experience symptoms resulting from photosensitive epilepsy, something else was at play in the subsequent cases. The next day, in playgrounds and classrooms, in news bulletins and at breakfast tables, all the talk was of Pokemon Shock. At this point, more children began to feel unwell. This was exacerbated when, astonishingly, some news shows actually screened the offending clip. But this time, the symptoms, headaches, dizziness, vomiting, were, says Radford, much more characteristic of mass sociogenic illness, MSI, than photosensitive epilepsy. MSI, also known as mass photogenic illness, MPI, and more colloquially as mass hysteria, is a well-documented phenomenon with cases spread throughout history, from meowing nuns and dancing epidemics in the Middle Ages to an outbreak of uncontrollable laughter in Tanzania in 1962. Along with Robert Bartholomew, a medical sociologist, he set about examining the timeline of events and unearthed a key detail. What people missed was that it wasn't just a one-night event, but instead unfolded over several days, and the contagion occurred in schools and over the news media. The Pokemon Shock event wasn't the only case of a broadcast program triggering an outbreak of MSI. And of course, this gave rise to the urban legend surrounding Pokemon. I love John Denver's music, and when I heard this urban legend, I was very disappointed. It involves an incident perpetually occurring at one of John Denver's concerts. According to the legend, Denver stopped his concert midway through and asked all Jehovah's Witnesses in the audience to leave, stating that his music, was not for them. A variation of the story is that John Denver went on the Johnny Carson show, and an interesting thing happened. The legend goes that John Denver hated Jehovah's Witnesses so much that before beginning his performance at these concerts, he would ask all the Jehovah's Witnesses to stand. He would then tell them to leave and that they weren't welcome at his show. Well, Johnny found out about this and asked John Denver. John Denver admitted that yes, he does do this at his concerts. So Johnny looks at him and says, "You see that cameraman over there?" "Yes," John Denver replied. "Well, he is a fantastic person and he happens to be a Jehovah's Witness. So now I would like to ask you, please leave my show." The audience cheered as John Denver was ushered off the set. Now, the stories about musical groups asking Jehovah's Witnesses to leave their concerts seem prevalent, with Chris de Burgh and Earth, Wind and Fire having their place in Jehovah's Witness folklore. This, of course, was all BS, and there are no records of any of the aforementioned ever happening. I was working in the house-to-house ministry one Sunday morning, accompanied by an elder. We knocked on the door of a particularly hostile and angry householder, and we were hastily ushered off the premises while his vicious dog was barking in the backyard. This prompted the elder to relay the story of the dog named Jehovah to me. And this is how the story goes. Two brothers were working in the house-to-house ministry one day and approached the house of a man who hated the Jehovah's Witnesses. He hated the Jehovah's Witnesses so much that he named his vicious dog Jehovah. As the two witnesses walked up to him, he called out to his dog, "Jehovah, attack!" The dog came running towards the two brothers, but something miraculously happened. The dog turned around and attacked the owner. Now, this story has a few variations as well. One is that the dog mysteriously dropped to the ground until the witnesses left. We all know how the Jehovah's Witnesses despise the United Nations. For decades, the society has preached that the United Nations is the disgusting thing and the scarlet-covered wild beast foretold in the Bible book of Revelation. And Jehovah's Witnesses are led to believe they should have nothing to do with the UN, as it is an organization that puts itself in the place of God's kingdom. And then there was the scandal, of course, that broke out in 1992. And that scandal was one of the first issues I uncovered in my investigation into the organization. South Africans especially never got to hear about this because we do not have access to viewing, or did not have access to viewing, television networks like CBS that exposed the issue to the US and the UK. In 1991, the Watchtower applied to the United Nations to become an NGO. The Watchtower's application was granted in 1992. As part of being a United Nations NGO, the Watchtower had to agree to a number of criteria that had to be met every year. But I digress. There is actually an urban legend associated with the UN. A brother, through his work, was asked to give a speech to the United Nations. He was very nervous about it, but he put together his entire speech that included the so-called truths that he had learned from the Watchtower. During his speech, he mentioned that the United Nations was spoken of in the Bible and that it says that they would soon wipe out all religion. After the speech, he was approached by a member of the UN. "How did you know about this?" the man said. "Like I said, it is prophesied in the Bible," the brother replied. "Well, that is fascinating," said the UN member. "We have been talking about doing that very thing for some time now." Once again, no record of this exists and is just part of the Watchtower folklore. There are many other urban legends within the halls of the Jehovah's Witness Kingdom Halls, within their publications and perpetuated from their platforms. Let me know in the comment section below which are some of your favorites.